There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10 at the ranch, Michael Blyther.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, today, Rex Heuermann appeared in court. It was a hearing. He looked a little bit different. He had sort of a new haircut. There he is in the picture you see on the screen, being spoken to by his attorney, Michael Brown. So accused Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann appeared in court Wednesday morning for a pre-trial conference. Rex Heuermann stood before the judge for only about 5 minutes as lawyers brought the judge up to date on evidence that's been submitted and will be submitted to Heuermann's attorney, Michael Brown, who you see the back of his head in this picture. The prosecutor said that it's going to take a while. According to Ray Tierney, you don't take a 13-year investigation and turn it over in a day or two. It's just a voluminous amount of stuff. And again, according to Ray Tierney, the Suffolk County District Attorney, they're providing this evidence on a rolling basis, as he describes it. Prosecutors revealed in court that a cheek swab taken from Heuermann matches DNA found on pizza crust disposed of by Heuermann outside his office in Manhattan. That pizza crust DNA, prosecutors say, is consistent with the DNA profile from a hair follicle found on the burlap material used to bind Gilgo Beach victim Megan Waterman. According to Tierney, they're very confident that this was going to be the case. The way the case is unfolding is consistent with their expectations. But Heuermann's attorney said not so fast, that none of this means definitely that the hair found on Waterman belongs to Heuermann. It's still a significant amount of people that could be the source of this hair, according to Michael Brown. Brown says 99% of the evidence he's received from prosecutors up to this point are videos, some of which include videos from cameras posted by police outside Heuermann's home in Massapequa Park. What the poll camera shows is a guy who gets up in the morning hanging out on his porch, Brown says. Also, during the pre-trial conference on Wednesday, the judge ruled out a motion filed by prosecutors to have Heuermann's guns transferred to Nassau County. According to the New York Times, Heuermann has over 279 guns. The value of these guns could exceed a couple $100,000, according to, again, will these guns be infamous because they once belonged to an alleged serial killer? His wife, Asa Ellerup, is trying to sell these guns just for an income, for survival. Heuermann's estranged wife, again, she's attempting to sell those guns. According to Brown, the attorney for Heuermann, he's doing the best he can. According to Brown, also, he was completely shocked. He didn't know why he was taken into custody, according to Brown. Brown also denied that Heuermann is a monster of a person. When he was arrested, there was a video in the actual police vehicle. My client, unless he's a tremendous actor, he was completely shocked. He had no idea why he's being taken into custody. The government doesn't tell you these things, but these things will be brought out at trial. According to District Attorney Tierney, Heuermann will be investigated for other deaths outside of those commonly referred to as the Gilgo Four. Tierney said that initially our investigation centered around the Gilgo Four. We were prepared to bring charges out of 3 of the 4 victims. We're working on the 4th, and now we have expanded our investigation to include other bodies that were recovered in that area. We'll speak about that when and if we're prepared to bring charges. So again, this investigation has been ongoing On the screen now is a picture of Michael Brown, who is Rex Heuermann's attorney. The picture on the screen is basically the file tape of Heuermann being walked out of Suffolk County detention facility and perhaps being brought to the court. Um, this is a very specific, and you've seen these file tapes time and time again. But again, today, every time Rex Heuermann moves, every time there's anything to do with this case, it'll be big news because, of course, this is the caper of the Long Island serial killer, also known as the Gilgo serial killer, or as they refer to it, the Lisk. This was from News Nation, one of many stations that was on the air during this live event today. I'll play a little bit of this.
The suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer appeared in a Long Island courtroom. Rex Heuermann, who was arrested in July, has pleaded not guilty. He is accused of killing at least 3 women, but he is also the prime suspect in the death of a 4th victim, all of the victims known collectively as the Gilgo Four. The sister of Maureen Brainerd Barnes in court this morning, sitting just a few feet away from Heuermann. To make their case, police are using DNA linked between a slice of pizza from Heuermann's Manhattan office and a male hair from the bottom of a burlap sack used to wrap one of the victims' bodies. That's in addition to hair found on 2 of the victims, which they say belongs to Heuermann's wife. All right, so joining us now, Sarah Azari, criminal trial attorney, News Nation legal analyst, and host of the podcast, The Presumption. Sarah, great to see you again. Today was really a quick appearance, but what was your biggest takeaway from what happened today in court?
Well, I think I expected this, Nicole. There is massive amount of discovery. We know there's DNA, there's digital discovery, phone records, there's video from searches that were conducted, and that there's going to be more coming. I mean, that what I heard was there's 2 terabytes of discovery that the defense has to go through. Heuermann only gets a limited amount of time to go through discovery, and while he's detained, I think it's about 2 hours daily or something. So this case, I mean, the investigation is ongoing, the discovery is ongoing, and the defense has to then do its own homework by independently evaluating that discovery. The second takeaway for me was with respect to the guns. What I learned today is that those guns are going to a licensed dealer. They are not being asked to be returned to the home where presumably some of the crimes that may have occurred. And so I would want those guns back. If they have no evidentiary value, then let the family at least sell them and be able to live.
Mm-hmm.
You know, folks, I find that, absolutely, if there's no evidentiary value to those guns, but how long will it take to figure that out? Potentially, it could take years. And if a judge hastily just releases these guns because he's sympathetic toward Rex Heuermann's wife, and then one of them turns out to have been used in a crime, or specifically a homicide, what are you going to do if that gun is gone? One of the things they could do is take an identifier from each and every weapon, and I mentioned this on my show last night, by firing the weapon into a ballistics tank and cataloging that ballistics, that projectile, cataloging it as to what and which gun it was fired from. And that's almost like a fingerprint or a gun's DNA. It could be identified if in the event that ballistics is recovered from a potential crime. So again, I don't see why the judge would rush to release these guns to Asa Ellerup. And again, not to her, they would have to release them to a licensed federal firearms dealer. And then if Asa Ellerup wished to sell them, she could sell them through the firearms dealer. So again, I don't see what the rush is here. And all these attorneys are acting like it's no big deal. And they would be the first ones to argue, well, where is this gun? Oh, we sold it. Well, I guess then you can't prove anything. The gun's gone, So I would be very reluctant if I was this judge to release anything until the district attorney the Suffolk County detectives clear the guns, as we have no evidentiary reason to keep them any longer.
You know, I didn't even think about the guns, Sarah, but certainly the massive amount of information really stood out to me as well. I know there's so much that Heuermann's legal team really has to review, but is it normal for a defendant to also review that? I mean, because he confirmed to the judge today that he is spending, 2 or 3 hours each day reviewing that information.
Absolutely. And, whenever we take a plea, the defendant is asked, have you had an opportunity to look at the evidence? Are you doing this knowingly? It's one thing if I look at evidence that's presented to me from my client, but there's nothing like a client himself looking at the evidence. He might not understand everything or the legal ramifications of certain pieces of evidence. That's my job to educate the client. But he certainly has a right and should review what the evidence is against him. I mean, this is a very serious case.
Every defendant, as this attorney says, every defendant should partake in their own defense. So it only makes sense that you would understand the evidence, maybe even make suggestions to your defense team. And yes, that makes sense. So apparently Rex Heuermann spends 3 to 4 hours per day reading discovery material. Of course, that's the evidence that the state, the police, the district attorney are filing or are waging against Rex Heuermann. That is their case.
Right. And like, especially with so much writing on what happens. So, Sarah, what type of defense is his team likely working on? And then is that likely to change after the next court date, as you said, when prosecutors are going to be giving even more discovery to the defense team?
Yeah, I think it's too early to determine his defense. Although I can say that I don't want to in any way diminish this investigation. I'm very impressed by it. It's pretty extensive. There's overwhelming evidence, but every case has its holes, and we look for those holes. We try to dismantle the case. We've got DNA. DNA is pretty, solid science, but even DNA has problems. The other issue is there are no eyewitnesses that place him near the victims or near the crime scenes. And so I think that as this digital and forensic and DNA evidence comes in, and the defense has an opportunity to hire independent experts to go through it, that's where we kind of see where the defense lies. But we have to remember that an added charge might be coming, and that just would mean even more evidence.
Right. Even more evidence. There's still so much left to find out here. Sarah Azari, certainly appreciate your time today. Thank you.
I think where the defense will be coming from is, of course, they're going to attack the evidence and the investigation, the evidence collectors. And if it may even get deeper in that they'll attack the quality of the investigation. Don't forget, it took over 12 years for them to come up with Rex Heuermann, even though they had the information in the case folder about the green Chevy Avalanche, and they had the information about a man that was 6'4" to 6'6" tall, fitting a description of, who they later on found out to be Rex Heuermann. Why did it take so long? That's something also that the defense can absolutely go after. So all of those things, when this defense attorney was asked, what are they going to go after? Obviously, they will go after the evidence. And again, the quality of the investigators and the investigation. Jakey, thank you so much for the £5 super sticker. Very much appreciated, folks. Charisma, congratulations for being a member of the Police Off the Cuff YouTube channel for 20 months. Thank you so much for your support. Very much appreciated. So, today, since it was the first real court appearance in a while, I would say just about every news organization was there reporting on this case because, of course, there is so much interest in this case. And although I don't think today there was any smoking gun information that they would say, there was some information, but nothing that it's going to, that if you don't hear about it, it's going to make a huge difference in this case.
Today, the suspect in the Gilgo Beach murders went before a judge. CBS 2's Jennifer McLogan live in Riverhead in Suffolk County with more. Jen?
Chris, good afternoon. Sitting in the front row, we heard his voice up close and personal for the first time. Rex Heuermann speaking, telling a judge he spends 2 to 3 hours a day, up to 4 hours reviewing evidence. The 60-year-old suspect sporting a brand new haircut during a court appearance that lasted about 5 minutes. Analysis shows DNA on the pizza box allegedly discarded by Gilgo Beach suspect Rex Heuermann matches his cheek swab. No surprise, says the district attorney.
A buccal swab was taken of the defendant. A DNA profile was obtained from that buccal swab, and the buccal swab of the defendant matches the DNA profile from that of the.
You know, it's funny. Early on in the investigation, when they just had what District Attorney Ray Tierney would refer to as an abandonment sample of DNA, which is DNA sample that the defendant threw out, i.e., he threw out a pizza box that had pizza crust that was left over that no doubt had his saliva on it, which was compared. Now, a defense attorney would be salivating at that type of evidence because he would say, how do you know that it was his pizza? How do you know someone else didn't throw that in there? How do you know that someone else didn't? So to slam that what ifs away from defense attorney Michael Brown, smartly, District Attorney Ray Tierney had a buccal swab, which buccal is, it's a term for the inside of your cheek. That's buccal. A buccal swab. So they swab a Q-tip, it gets saliva, and that was compared against the hair found, I believe it was on the body of Megan Waterman, or that's what she was tied up with. So that slams all of that away as a potential excuse or an alibi or whatever you want to call it, try to defeat the evidence from defense attorney Michael Brown. So very smartly, Ray Tierney did that.
And the abandonment sample in the pizza box.
That erases all doubt, claim prosecutors, that Rex Heuermann is their man. The defense disagrees.
DNA can be transferred. DNA can be transferred from me going up to the cameraman and shaking his hand.
The defendant appeared in a white shirt, dark jacket, and khaki pants, his handcuffed wrists hidden behind him, saying he spends up to 4 hours a day in jail looking at discovery of police scene logs, memo logs, and more. How is his mood and demeanor now?
He's somebody who has from the beginning has said he's not guilty. So he's now incarcerated. He's a fellow who was working.
You know, in policing and criminal justice 101, you learn that every single defendant is innocent, even the ones convicted in prison. They still maintain their innocence. So I would say that that's policing 101, criminal justice 101, correction officer 101. Every single person you come in contact with was framed or they were a victim of the criminal justice system. Not a single one of them will admit to being guilty.
Has never been arrested, has a wife and children, is a productive member of society. And obviously the district attorney, the government is making these allegations and they're horrific. But if he's not guilty of this, well, now he has to sit in custody.
Heuermann says he is not a serial killer.
We're prepared to bring charges with regard to 3 out of the 4 Gilgo 4 victims. We're working on the 4th Gilgo victim, and now we've expanded our investigation to include other bodies that were recovered in that area.
Prosecutors say all 10 sets of remains found along Ocean Parkway are being investigated in case of possible links to Rex Heuermann, whose next court case will meet here November 15th. We're live in Riverhead, Long Island. Jennifer McLogan.
So, of course, the 4th victim who they are referring to is Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Early on in the investigation, District Attorney Tierney had sort of reiterated that they're waiting for certain tests, certain evidence to come back in order to charge that case. They're not going to just charge that case if they don't have the powerful evidence that they need to bring the case forward. So Right now, they have 3 cases. Were he to get convicted of these 3 cases, he will never see the light of day anyway. I believe he would get life without parole. So the 4th case is important also, though, for closure for the family and to tie these cases together. But even with those 4 cases, I believe there are 7 more bodies, and it will have to be determined whether or not Rex Heuermann, if they can tie him into that. In addition, there is a potentiality that he did other crimes in other places. That's one of the reasons when I talk about the guns. That's not his MO. That's not his modus operandi. It seems that his modus operandi in regards to these alleged murders that he committed is asphyxia or strangulation. So he's not one to use a firearm. But how do we know? Can someone go outside their comfort zone? Can someone go outside their modus operandi? Yeah, they can. So if you were sitting with those black robes in a chair above the rest of the courtroom and you have the title of judge, how quickly would you be to release those guns to a firearms dealer on behalf of Rex Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup? Well, I can tell you, if I was sitting there and I had black robes and a gavel in my hand, I would wait. I would wait till the investigation on those guns, that the police could tell me they're satisfied that the guns were not used in any other crimes. We've taken the gun's signature by firing each and every one of the guns into a ballistics tank. We have each one of the 279 guns, the projectile from each one, invoiced and cataloged, and we're pretty satisfied that if a gun would come up to compare against the ballistics of a potential homicide, that we can compare it against any one of these guns, even if they were stolen. And that, I guess, would satisfy the evidentiary requirements that might make a judge release these guns on behalf of Asa Ellerup, Rex Heuermann's wife, who right now it appears may be indigent and could use this money to support herself and her family. But again, this is a legal issue. And as I said, if you were sitting on that, above that court, wearing black robes and had a gavel in your hand, how quickly would you be to allow to release that stuff?
In the Gilgo Beach murders appeared in court, or is appearing in court today. It's just a status conference for Rex Heuermann. He's accused, of course, of 3 counts of first-degree murder and the deaths of 3 women more than a decade ago. He's pled not guilty through his attorney. This hearing comes as his family is making an odd request, some might think, is to have investigators return some of the items that were taken from their home. Joining us now, Court TV Crime and Justice correspondent Matt Johnson, who's been covering this case since it broke. We'll get to the family requests in a bit, but first, what is the latest in this case? Where are we?
So I believe it just wrapped up. This was just a status hearing, if you will. And there has been some reporting out of the courtroom of, once again, Rex Heuermann, like when I was in court covering it for Court TV, looked out at the gallery, stared at the reporters.
Oh.
And then walked out. All right, suspected Long Island serial killer Rex Heuermann back in court today for this pretrial conference. We could learn a little bit later of what he...
Folks, someone in the chat asked, how did they come up with the term buccal swab? That's a medical term, and it's spelled B-U-C-C-A-L. Dentists always use that word to recover to the buccal side of the mouth, or lingual. So it's a medical term. So that's where they came up with that phrase.
He's going to do with all the guns, what the court is going to do. Heuermann's estranged wife, Asa Ellerup, is asking for those guns to be returned to her. Between 200 and 300 guns were seized during a search of their Long Island home over the summer. Heuermann was arrested and charged for the murders of 3 women in July: Megan Waterman, Melissa Bartholomew, Amber Costello, and remains the prime suspect in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. All 4 victims were sex workers who disappeared after meeting a client. Their bodies discovered near Gilgo Beach, wrapped in burlap. Some were wrapped with tape and also belts, Ted. And I think that that's what we're waiting for the most in this case. Is they say that they have some evidence that they are testing for this 4th victim. When, if, will he get charged?
Right. And so these guns, I mean, it's a massive amount of guns. Obviously, they have some monetary value. Being the guns of a serial killer might actually boost that value.
You know, folks, that concept, the fact that these guns belonged to an alleged serial killer, let's say alleged, does that raise the value to the wacky public that might perhaps buy them? Yes, it does. For a collector, sounds crazy, right? And I don't know if in New York that this would apply, or this would have anything to do with the Son of Sam law, which is a law that precludes anyone convicted of a crime to financially benefit from their crime. I don't think, because he's not benefiting, his family would be. So maybe they could loosely apply that law. I don't know if they would even want to. But again, would these guns be worth more because they once belonged to an alleged serial killer?
What's the ask here from the family?
The ask is coming from Asa Ellerup. So she's the estranged wife filing for divorce. She's asking for the guns to be returned to her. Ellerup's attorney says that the guns hold no forensic value, according to them. She and her 2 kids were cleared early on by police after her husband's arrest. Ellerup is fighting cancer and has no health insurance currently right now, according to her attorney. So she wants those guns back. They're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Of course, she wants to sell them.
At this point in time, this is all overwhelming to her. Her whole life has been put into upheaval, as of her children's. Her husband is sitting in jail, accused of being, a serial killer. So she's sorting out her own emotions, taking care of her children before even addressing whether or not these allegations are true. We'll get to that at another point in time when she starts sorting out her own emotions. She needs to survive right now.
She's having a hard time from what I'm hearing, also from other sources that I have. I met her in the front yard there. She's also asking for cash, clothing, and jewelry that were taken from the home during the police search. They were there over a week. The guns, she says, first need to be released to the proper county, Suffolk County, and she's hoping for them. She says that you don't even have to return them to me or my attorney. You could, of course, return them to a gun dealer. I mean, the optics of all of this, having guns returned.
The reporter actually said they would have to be returned to Suffolk. No, they would have to be returned to Nassau County. That's where Massapequa Park is. That's where the guns were removed from. So the jurisdiction for those guns would be Nassau County. So I believe I'm correct, and I believe the reporter just was mistaken, because the whole case is being prosecuted in Suffolk County. That's where the body's recovered. A homicide is recorded in the location where the body is found. So with these guns, they were recovered based on a search warrant inside the Massapequa Park home, which is in Nassau County, of Rex Heuermann. So I believe that's where the guns would go to
the family of a serial killer. They're trying to avoid any pushback with that, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I mean, you have to feel for her. I mean, can you imagine? One day your husband, whoever, whatever their relationship was, he goes to work, and next thing you know, you find out he's a serial killer?
Right, and your connection to it all, of course, you lived with him, and he was living a double life. If he gets accused of what he's accused of, the worst, right? But also, it was some of the forensic genealogy, her DNA, her hair on some of those victims, from what we're hearing.
Yeah, and she's been cleared, like you said, and now is truly a victim as well. And you got to feel for her. And if she needs the cash, she needs the cash. I understand, but it is a little dicey. We'll have to see how it is handled by the court. Matt Johnson, thank you as always. Let's bring in criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Franz Boakat in Baton Rouge. Franz, should she get her guns back while her hubby, who's accused of these horrible crimes, goes through this long, arduous process?
You know, folks, someone in the chat was saying, didn't Rex Heuermann have money? Didn't he have banked money? I don't know what his finances were. Apparently, even though he did own a architectural firm, his finances were not in good shape, from what I understand. And I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that, but obviously I'm hearing that from the investigators, that his finances were not in good shape. So did he leave any money for his wife, Asa Ellerup, and his 2 adult children? Well, I don't think so. Apparently, there was a GoFundMe for them, I think, which raised over $50-something thousand. You can be sympathetic to Asa Ellerup, or you can be unsympathetic. It's your business, I happen to believe that even though it seems as though she wasn't involved or had knowledge of Rex Heuermann's activities or his second life as an alleged serial killer, I happen to believe, and again, I may take some heat for this, that she would have to be mentally ill to live with this guy. I really do. And, you can disagree with me, but apparently the house was not just cluttered, was an absolute disaster. I've spoken to people that were inside that house, and it was disgusting. The fact that they're suing for the police doing damage to their house is almost laughable to me. From what I understand, they had to take hourly breaks in processing the home because they couldn't stand the smell. So you guys who've never been in locations like this, could they have all been hoarders? Potentially, yeah. And if you've ever been in the home of a hoarder, it's not pretty in any stretch of the imagination. It's not healthy to be inside there. It's disgusting, really. So
Process.
Well, nobody might like what I'm about to say, but here's the deal. If it's not evidence, the government can't seize property without some kind of legal justification, right? So I got to tell you, Ted, I think the guns go back if they're not evidence, right? And let's not mince words. She has every intention of selling these guns, probably to survive, right? Will the guns fetch a value because he may be a serial killer? Absolutely. But this is a little different than if he were to write a book about, his exploits and profit off of his crimes. That would be different than what we have here. She can sell property that is either community property, her property, or his property, and there's not a lot any of us can do about it. So I think she gets the guns back as long as they don't have an evidentiary value to her.
But folks, my argument again, this guy's an attorney and I'm not. Well, how do they know they have no evidentiary value to them unless they allow this investigation to move forward? Is there a potentiality that he killed other people in other places? So if they haven't discovered that yet, how did they then potentially get rid of evidence that could connect Rex Heuermann to a as yet unfound homicide victim? Is that a stretch, or do you believe that's a possibility? I think it's a possibility.
But could you argue, if you're the state, we don't know. Like, we don't know if they're evidence yet, because first of all, we're still trying to hook him to that 4th victim who we believe he's responsible for her death. And maybe there is a connection of a gun being used. Now, which one of the 300, who knows? There could be a roadblock here put up by the prosecution.
Well, so here's the deal. You should be able to figure out if one of the guns was used on a victim, what caliber was used, right? So you could exclude the firearms that aren't of that caliber. The judge could then say, you know what? You're absolutely right, state. We're going to give you some time to figure this out, but we have to have a deadline at some point because you don't get to seize the property indefinitely, right? Now, a lot of times this plays itself out in most states with at the end of the case, you get the firearms back, okay? But in this instance, if they are not tied to a crime, there's really no reason not to give them back to her. I know it doesn't feel right. I know it kind of feels a little icky, but that seems to be what the law is, and that seems to be what the Constitution says.
The case itself against Heuermann, the fourth, they're waiting on some testing and maybe some, who knows what else, probably trying to break him as well as he's in custody.
No, they're not trying to break him. They're not allowed to talk to him anymore. It's based on his Miranda warnings. He requested an attorney. End of conversation. The police are not allowed to interview him anymore.
Get the fourth, enough for charges against the fourth victim. Let's say they can't get to a comfortable spot with Maureen Barnes. They would just go ahead with the three, and there's no time limit. I mean, at some point down the road, they can always add Maureen if they're now comfortable. Why hold up the trial now unless I guess they feel like they're very close, they just need some tests back?
So fortunately or unfortunately, I've previously represented a serial killer in Louisiana before, and I'll tell you what normally happens is they will prosecute the strongest cases. They will use the weaker case as other crimes evidence in the stronger cases. And then once they get a conviction on the stronger cases, they can make a decision based on the victim's family's input of, well, what are we going to do with this? You know, if he's already doing a life sentence, or if he has worse, are we gonna use the resources to try the fourth case if the victim's family is satisfied that he's not going anywhere and he's going to either be incarcerated for the rest of his life or worse?
And family input is important. These are cases that were unsolved for so long, and the relief, I'm sure, from those families that now there is an answer and a relief to everybody in that Long Island area. That will possibly dictate where it goes, correct? Like you, to your point, how involved were the families of the serial killer you represented to what extent?
You know, folks, I think that this guy's a little bit off what he's talking about. First of all, the prosecution is in no rush whatsoever to bring these charges. I think if they have to, they could start the case tomorrow. The defense could not respond ready. They haven't had the discovery, and they don't have all this discovery yet to proceed with this case. So to think that, oh, they're ready to go, and it's the prosecution holding up this case. It's not. It's the defense is not ready to go. And you'll see that the defense attorney, Michael Brown, indicates that he's not ready to go at all. He hasn't even received, half of the discovery material. You heard that Rex Heuermann is spending 3 to 4 hours a day reading discovery material. So how are they ready to go? And as far as charging 3 of the 4 cases, yeah. If they get convictions on 3 of those cases, and then later on they try Maureen Brainerd Barnes, the 3 cases will put Rex Heuermann in prison for the rest of his life. So it's almost not even necessary. But of course, you want to charge the 4th case because you want closure for the family, and you want to know that this person did this. And so you can't say, oh, we're not going to charge this because he's already getting life in prison. He's already getting life without parole. And of course, there's so many different angles on this case. There's so many different questions on this case. There's so many people that think this case was a result of police corruption from 2010 to 2012, and then 2012, Chief James Burke took over the investigation from 2012 to 2015. So there are so many other cases outside the evidence and outside the actual murders. I'm going to play a little bit of this from Channel 5 here, Fox.
where the accused Gilgo Beach serial killer suspect is appearing in court. Rex Heuermann is charged with killing 3 women whose remains were found in Gilgo Beach and is suspected in a 4th case. Jody Goldberg is live outside the courthouse for us with the latest on today's pretrial conference. Jody.
Chris, good afternoon to you. It was a scheduled court conference that took just less than 5 minutes, the majority of it taking place behind closed doors with the judge, the defense team, and prosecutors. Take a look at these pictures. This is suspect Rex Heuermann. It looks like he has a fresh haircut. He was wearing khakis, and his hands were cuffed behind a black jacket. Now, he also spoke for the first time. The judge asked if he's taking advantage of his right to review discovery, and he answered he's averaging about 2 to 3 hours each day. Now, you may ask, what is discovery? That's what DA Tierney is calling voluminous evidence that's being handed over to the defense team on a rolling basis or as it comes in. Now, prior to this court hearing, the defense had well over 8,000 pages of evidence, and today they were given an additional 5,000 pages, including grand jury testimony and exhibits, as well as property warrants, subpoenas, DNA reports, memo books from officers as they carefully combed Heuermann's home, as well as storage units in the days following his arrest. Now, in court, prosecutors also shared the DNA of pizza crust, which initially helped track Heuermann to this case, and it matched his cheek swab. The DA says this finding is consistent with expectations and may indicate the swab may very well match the hair found on one of the victim's burlap sacks. The defense team also...
The parties, defense and prosecution, we worked out some logistics with regard to the protective order, with regard to discovery. We provided a number of items of discovery. Not only prior to the court appearance, but at the court appearance. We'll continue to provide that discovery on a rolling basis.
Does Rex want to stay in custody? Of course not. Of course not. But he can't bail out, and we are not going to go to trial until we get all the discovery, and the district attorney under the law is required to provide us with all of the discovery.
And now there hasn't been any update in charging Heuermann with that 4th murder. He is a prime suspect in the murder of victim Maureen Brainard Barnes. Heuermann is due back in court on November 15th. Chris, let's send it back to you.
We begin.
So, folks, there is, again, you could see according to that report right there, the defense got 13,000 pages of discovery. You think they're ready to go? Are they ready to go? 13,000. How long does it take you to read 13,000 pages of discovery? 13,000 pages of evidentiary material. Not only do you have to read it, but you have to digest it. You have to understand it. What the hell does this mean? Take notes if you're crafting a defense, right? Come up with ways that you could potentially argue that this evidence doesn't mean what you say it means. But just take that in. 13,000 pages of evidence. Wow. Yeah. Cheryl F., yes. Wow. 13,000 pages. That's an incredible amount, isn't it? Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff. Real crime stories, if you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective. Then go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. And if you want to support us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel memberships with 5 different levels. And you see the folks in the green font. They're part of our YouTube fans, our subscribers, and our friends. And we really appreciate them. You play, you pay. Who is paying for his attorney? Well, if he's indigent and he has no means to pay for it, then the taxpayers are paying for it. But he doesn't have legal aid. This guy, Michael Brown, is I think they call it 18B attorney. And 18B attorneys are private attorneys who volunteer to take cases for less than they usually get. And they're paid, their fee is paid by the government. Now, Rex Heuermann has assets. Can the government make him sell his home to pay for his attorney? I don't know. I don't know if that's a possibility, but they could make him pay for whatever he's able to pay because he potentially doesn't fit the criteria as being indigent in order to qualify for an attorney for free, or for on the, I should say, not for free, but on the taxpayer's dime, And usually defendants get legal aid. If a defendant gets 18B, then potentially they can get a really excellent attorney for, I guess, cut rate. But these attorneys volunteer to do that type of work. I guess they feel like they want to give something back in their legal career and not just be making, I'm not speaking for them, but that's why they volunteer for 18B. Here's District Attorney Ray Tierney after the hearing today, and this was the press conference.
Yeah, nice. Good afternoon or good morning. Thanks for everyone for coming out to Suffolk County. As you see, it was a typical court conference with a case like this. It's not exciting, but it's necessary. The parties, defense and prosecution, we worked out some logistics with regard to the protective order, with regard to discovery. We provided a number of items of discovery, not only prior to the court appearance, but at the court appearance. We'll continue to provide that discovery on a rolling basis, and the next court date is November 15th.
Can you explain what Mr. Santomartino said in court, that apparently there's a match between the DNA on the pizza crust and the buccal swab you took from Mr. Heuermann, and explain the significance of that?
Sure. So that was provided. That was provided today. That the data and the reports pertaining to that aspect. So as everyone I think knows, that there was an abandonment sample obtained from the defendant via the pizza box, and the pizza that was in the pizza box, a DNA profile was obtained from that pizza. Subsequent to the defendant's arrest, a buccal swab was taken of the defendant. A DNA profile was obtained from that buccal swab, and the buccal swab of the defendant matches the DNA profile from that of the abandonment sample in the pizza box.
When you just hear about the swab to the hair, when are we going to hear about the swab to the hair that was found on this waterman? That was the other thing that you guys said you needed the swab for, was to run that analysis. Well,
I think it's going to be the same thing, because the pizza box and the buccal swab are the same. It's the same profile.
Folks, what we were talking about here is that when the defense attorney was even asked early on, is the abandonment sample of DNA, basically, are you satisfied that was compared against the hair on the one of the victims? And he was not. So he was ready to argue that. And that is one of the reasons they took we used to call it an exemplar, and he's District Attorney Ray Tierney is calling it a sample from a he says buccal swab, which is a Q-tip swab of the inside of the mouth from cheek cell saliva, and that's how they get the sample of the DNA. And that was compared against the pizza, and then, of course, it was compared to the hair that was found on one of the bodies. Because had they not done that, they would have left it open for the defense attorney to argue that Rex Heuermann's DNA could have got on the pizza crust in a variety of different ways. Now he doesn't have that argument to make.
Over exactly what was handed over today?
It's over, I think, 5,000 pages of material. So primarily grand jury material, grand jury reports, grand jury exhibits, that sort of stuff.
And the exhibits included video walkthroughs, footage from the car, the memo books. Can you go through that, the storage unit?
So, it's just a voluminous amount of stuff, and we're providing it on a rolling basis. So, it's just it's a continuing process.
Is this the first time you've spoken for today?
Probably, yeah.
Just to
clarify. You have the buccal swab. It matches the pizza crust. Does it match the hair that's on Megan Waterman's body from the buccal swab?
So that analysis doesn't change anything that's in our bail letter.
Can you confirm that?
You know, he was when he says that that analysis doesn't change anything in our that was in our bail letter. I've encouraged everyone that's been following this case. The district attorney from Suffolk County put out a 32-page bail application letter, which sort of summarizes 13 years or 12 years of this investigation. And they talk about the 3 hairs that were found on the bodies, 3 of them being matched to Asa Ellerup, and 1 of them being matched to Rex Heuermann. And initially, the match was due to the abandonment sample of DNA that was acquired through discarding the pizza, and the pizza crust was swabbed, and that's where they obtained Rex's DNA. So that the defense attorney wouldn't have that argument that, oh, that could have been obtained in many other ways. Again, they took a buccal swab from Rex Heuermann. That was compared against the pizza and the hair found on one of the bodies, and it was a match. So that's what the reporter asked the question. Was it also compared to the hair? And he answered in the affirmative.
In the past, it matched.
Well, you're using the term match. It's consistent with. Okay. Yeah. And then there's a ratio, a probability that's provided. So that would just confirm all of that which is contained in the bail letter.
Swab increase the ratio, increase the probability?
No.
What is the protective order pertaining to?
So in all cases, really, you have a protective order with a number of conditions in the protective order. Really, the most important one is that the material that is provided is not provided to the media. So there are terms and conditions in the in all protective orders, and that you go through a series of just working with the court, working with defense counsel to hammer out language that works for everybody. So sometimes you have to make slight modifications, and that's what we did in this case. And in this specific case, there was a watermark that the defense found unwieldy, so they asked, and we complied and removed the watermark.
The mention of the amount of time he's got to, or the amount of time he's able to review this discovery, 2 to 3 hours. Based on that, as long as that being how long he can sit and do this on a daily basis, how long do you think it's going to take him to get through all the discovery?
Well, he says it's up to 4 hours, and so again, that's something that the defense does, but it's given to the material is given to his counsel, and then his counsel chooses how they review it, who they review it with, and the methodology behind that. So we'll just leave that to them.
Are you feeling stronger about the case now that the DNA has come back? I mean, I think this is sort of is this not a monumental development, or did you know this was?
Not at all.
Okay.
We were very confident that this was going to be the case. When you look at a case, there are things that we as a prosecution team expect. And the way the case is unfolding, is consistent with our expectations. So
the question was, this a monumental, smoking gun piece of evidence? I think the district attorney's office knew about this already, and so again, was it monumental? Was it something that they didn't expect? No, they fully expected this. And when it came back, they already had the match to the abandonment sample. So just to get it, solidify that, and not give a defense attorney an argument that, oh, this came from an abandonment sample. How do we know where that sample came from? Blah, 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 blah. He could argue a million things. They took a buccal swab. And again, no pun intended, they got the DNA from the horse's mouth. In this instance, Rex Heuermann's mouth. So right from the source, rather than from, a a surreptitious collecting of DNA from a pizza box. This is Rex Heuermann's attorney talking about his defense of this evidence, about the voluminous nature of this, and how DNA does not give you the full story. So let's listen to Michael Brown.
So that's all I can tell you. And I have not, and that's assuming a lot of different things, right? Because DNA can be transferred. DNA can be transferred from me going up to the cameraman and shaking his hand, and I would say he would get my hair, but I have no hair, but he would get my DNA, and then he goes to a second person, and now it's transferred. So
see, but what he's talking about is skin cell DNA. The DNA that they got from the pizza was saliva. The DNA from the buccal swab was saliva. No one goes up to someone and licks them, and that's how DNA would be transferred. But so he's referring to touch DNA, much different than body fluid DNA. But defense attorneys are sharp, they're slippery, and it's what he's doing.
all things, I'm just putting that out there, but going back to inclusive versus exclusive, it's still a significant amount of people that could be the source of this hair. But anyway, any other questions?
You said something about the protective order to the judge. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, so initially there was a protective order that we agreed to, which had a couple of things in it that were troubling to us. Number one is there's a watermark across every single piece of evidence, every photograph. It's troubling because we want to obviously print out some of these items and utilize it to our benefit at trial. In addition, the photographs that they provided were in a PDF fashion. So PDF is much less clear than a digital photograph. So we wanted everything digital because when you enlarge things digitally, you can see much more detail. That's going to be important for us. So those are two of the things that we're now getting. I don't know if there's any other significant portions of the protective order that were amended, but those were two significant parts. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk about your client was asked if he was taking advantage of his right to review material? What is he doing? Is he reviewing everything that you get?
He is. So what happened was we went to the court, we went to Justice Mazie, and we asked for a court order. We wanted a court order because we wanted to enable him the opportunity to review all the discovery while he's in custody. Justice Mazie signed that, and the sheriff is now abiding by that order, and he's permitting my client to review the discovery as it trickles in. We're providing it to him, and he's reviewing the discovery.
And how is his mood and demeanor now?
Well, he's somebody who has from the beginning has said he's not guilty. So he's now incarcerated. He's a fellow who was working, has never been arrested, has a wife and children, is a productive member of society. And obviously the district attorney, the government is making these allegations and they're horrific. But if he's not guilty of this, well, now he has to sit in custody, be away from his family, be away from his wife and kids, not work, not produce for his family and support them, and sit in a jail cell until this case can come to fruition.
Folks, one of the things, though, and again, no one's going to be asking rebuttal questions to this attorney, then if he's so innocent, how come there was no bail application made by you? Did you ever think of that, folks? That if he's so innocent sitting in jail and they can argue this case and they have arguments that he didn't do it, why haven't they made a bail application? Good question, right? Has anyone else thought of that? Yeah, I think we should think of that.
So he's doing the best he can. The sheriff made a comment about how he's not making any emotions, right? And I know the press ran with that and said, oh, look, he's not showing emotions. Well, I have to tell you that when I first started on this case, I made it a point to tell him, just get through this, Rex. Get through this. Get to the point where we can go to trial. And don't show emotion. Don't let anything upset you. Just be stoic. And that's what he's done. And then we saw a comment, unfortunately, and I have a lot of respect for Sheriff Toulon, but the sheriff made a comment about he's not showing emotion. And from that, I can tell you there's something wrong with him. Well, that's just not the case. That's just sensationalism. And that's just things that, unfortunately, poison the jury pool. That's not true. So,
You know, folks, we used to say when on the police department that when you arrested someone and you put them in a cell and they fell right to sleep, that was a huge indication of guilt. Because a normal person, when arrested, is very upset and cannot sleep, is thinking, is pacing back and forth in the cell, is fretting, is upset, and wants to get out of there. But a guilty person just goes right to sleep. So there's some truth to that. And I know a defense attorney doesn't want to ever believe that, but anyone that's ever been a cop or correction officer, they know that that's true.
The answer to your question is he's doing the best he can at this point.
Has he been in touch with those children?
They do communicate, yes.
Have they physically?
Yes, sir.
What's your experience working with the data? Was it the table of contents? Was it you worked with?
In terms, which data are you referring to?
This is 8 terabytes to start with that.
The 8 terabytes. So initially we got 4 external hard drives. 99% of those 4 external hard drives was what's called poll cameras. What the DA's office did is they set, in the police department, I should say, they had poll cameras focused on my client's house from a year and a half prior up until the date of the arrest. What that shows, and this defies common sense that he is actually the murderer, what the poll cameras show is a guy who gets up in the morning, he goes to work, he comes home, he spends time with his wife and children. You see him chopping wood, you see him hanging out on his porch. That's what you see.
Yeah, he's a regular Abe Lincoln chopping wood on his porch. He forgot to mention the burner phones. He forgot to mention the dating of prostitutes. He forgot to mention, he's leaving a lot of things out. The family man.
And that is 99% of what we got from the beginning.
Yeah, so you said you've got very little actual evidence. I mean, can you expand on that?
So we just talked about those 4 external hard drives. I have ME reports, which are from the scene itself. They don't attribute in any way my client to the commission of these acts. The poll cameras basically defy their suggestion that this is this monster of a person. When he was arrested, there was a video in the actual police vehicle. My client, unless he's a tremendous actor, he was completely shocked, had no idea why he was being taken into custody. And there's this interaction. So they don't tell you, the government doesn't tell you about these things, but these are things we're going to bring out during the course of the trial.
You said 99% of what you've reviewed is poll cameras?
What I had said was in the first 4 external hard drives, I'm going to say that there's about 99% of that was the poll camera video. Correct.
So you've been given very little indication of what their actual case is at this point?
I think that you folks have received what I received, which is the bail letter, which says there's a pizza crust, and then they talked about burner phones, and they talked about pinging in New York City. That's what I've seen in terms of the bail letter. Pinging in New York City, I mean, you folks know how the ping works, and there's probably hundreds of thousands of people that are pinging off that cell site at any given time. That's all I've seen.
Given that and the fact that he's been able to...
How is Rex doing right now?
Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Given that and the fact that he's got 2 to 3 hours at a clip sitting there going through this evidence with you, how come we're being told by the DA that it's going to be months and months and months before we get to trial? Does he want to be in jail for months and months?
You're asking me. Well, I haven't gotten discovery. I'm still waiting for. So let's talk about things like this investigation was going on for 10 to 12 years. There were numerous other suspects, and you folks have reported this. There's numerous other suspects that they looked at. I want to see those records. I want to see those notes. I want to see why the police accused other people, were focusing on other people, and what it is about those individuals that caused them to discount those other individuals. I haven't seen any of that. I also want to see, obviously, the crime lab. I want to see the testing that was done. I want to make sure it was done in the right manner and fashion. None of that I have seen. Going back to your question, does Rex want to stay in custody? Of course not. Of course not. But he can't bail out, and we are not going to go to trial until we get all the discovery, and the district attorney under the law is required to provide us with all of the discovery.
Do you expect him to be charged in a fourth murder?
You'd have to ask Mr. Tierney about that. I have no idea. I have no idea.
And Rick is spending 2 to 3 hours a day going through this discovery himself. Is that something he wanted to do, something that he asked you specifically if he could, be privy to the information?
Sure. I mean, he's the defendant. He's charged. He's an intelligent man. He's never been arrested. He wants to know what is it that they have that they're saying I'm involved in this. So as a defense attorney, we obviously want to share that with our client. If he was out of custody, he'd probably be coming to my office and we'd review that together. Because he's in custody, we made copies, and we're affording him the opportunity so that he can, at his leisure, review these items and all the discovery and assist in his defense, because that's what it's all about.
You said most of the evidence was from the cameras. What about other evidence you've seen?
Well, those 4 external hard drives. So again, about 99% is these poll cameras. Then you have approximately 3,000 pages deal with the ME's report when they found the bodies on each of the 3 occasions. We had videos again of him being arrested and what they call the takedown, and him in the police vehicle. I think that's the extent of what I recall in the first set, in the first 4 external hard drives. The 5th external hard drive.
Well, folks, that's Michael Brown, attorney for Rex Heuermann. And to tell you the truth, as attorneys go, I think he's excellent. I think he's an excellent attorney. Many of us in the law enforcement field don't particularly like attorneys, but I think he's an excellent attorney. He's articulate. He's measured. He's experienced. And he comes across as extremely professional. And it's... For example, today, there was no real smoking gun new information today. Everything is breaking this, breaking that. There was just the information that the DNA that they took from the buccal swab matched the DNA on the pizza that matched the hair that was found on the body. And you heard Ray Tierney say, well, we expected that. That's nothing that came out that we were saying, oh, we were shocked. They knew that was going to happen. Folks, if you're looking for a great defense attorney in the New York City metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe's a retired NYPD member of the service, and he's a fantastic defense attorney. You can reach Joe on his cell at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com. Go on his website, jmurray-law.com. Not just being a great attorney, but Joe Murray's a huge supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast, and we really appreciate Joe. He's been supporting this podcast since its inception, basically, and we really appreciate him. We never want to forget also, as we cover this case, as we cover any homicide case, that on the screen, that's what this is about, the victims, and actually these are the Gilgo 4. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. Sometimes we lose sight of that. And when you look at the dates, these cases go back to 2007 in the case of Maureen Brainerd Barnes and Melissa Bartolome, 2009, Amberlynn Costello, 2010, and Megan Waterman, 2010. So we're talking, anywhere from 13 years to 16 years ago, these cases. So it's been a long time. There's a lot of information on this case. There's a lot of misinformation. And we're going to be following this case all the way through as new things turn up on this case, as new information, as new evidence. And there's not the evidence now, and the case is moving slowly, because it's all a lot of lawyer stuff, discovery material, new evidentiary material, hearings, all of the legal stuff that is part of our system. Folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. This is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
One episode just ain't enough.